Hello, and welcome to week 2 of our poetry workshop. I apologize so much to all of you for any technical difficulties that we've been experiencing together. I'm hoping that this week you will hear the audio that I will connect to this lecture. Please do let me know if you don't hear this. So this week, what I'd like you to begin with is to do a 10-minute warm-up. This is a very weird one. We're going to be writing towards weirdness, and the idea is to get your brain thinking differently in order for us to write, to do the exercises for this week. So when you do this exercise, please begin by making a list of zeros and ones. Then translate them into devastations and miracles. Now understand that how you interpret this is part of the prompt. So allow yourself to get weird. What does this prompt mean for you? Give yourself 10 minutes, write, and then post it in our online class. Don't worry, you aren't graded on these warm-ups. The way that they're only meant to get you opened up to what we're going to be talking about today. So the reading that you did for today, or hopefully you'll do for today, or this week, is 2 chapters in Mary Oliver's book, Poetry Handbook. You're going to read Sound, the chapter Sound, and the chapter More Devices of Sound. I'd also like you to read these selections from the Modern American Poetry Anthology. Now they do have it at the bookstore. I think the 2 books together, it's about $60 to $80. I'm not sure exactly. And I apologize for the price, but if you totally can't purchase it, please let me know, and I will. You can come by my office hours and make copies for mine if you'd like. But I highly encourage you to get the anthology. Just a little side note: when I was an undergrad, I bought a few anthologies as part of my poetry workshops, and I still have those anthologies today, and they're really meaningful to me. This is a very inclusive anthology, and I really think that you'll enjoy it. So please, if you can purchase it, I highly recommend it. The poems you're going to be reading, and I'll be talking about these a little bit later, are The Letter by Amy Lowell, Home Burial by Robert Frost, Touch Me by Stanley Kunitz, September 1st, 1939 by W.H. Auden, and then selections from The Book of the Dead by Muriel Rukeyser. So your first exercise today, this is for your first writing assignment, I'm banking on the idea that you've already done your reading, you've already done your warm-up before you start writing this next poem. You're going to be working on harnessing sound to create meaning. So as you know, poets select words for their sound as well as their meaning. They want to control the way the page speaks to the listening mind. Language is rich and malleable. Why choose the word? So for example, why choose the word rock over stone? Right? This is something that Mary Oliver talks about in the chapter. If you look up the exact denotations of these words, of exact definitions, right? Rock, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is the solid mineral material forming part of the surface of the Earth and other similar planets, exposed on the surface or underlying the soil of or oceans. And a stone is the hard, solid, non-metallic mineral matter of which rock is made, especially as a building material. So when we think about using the word rock or stone, we use them pretty interchangeably in our language, right? They mean basically the same thing. However, if you say the word rock, right, or if you say the word stone, right, they sound different. And the reason why is because of the way the sounds come out. So the word stone with that N sound at the end and the S sound at the beginning feels more smooth. The word rock, right, with the R and the K, it feels more powerful, right? Why? Right? Why do you think that is? And if you make a little list to yourself, in the meetup we did this. We put the two words on the board and started to think about, when you would use stone versus when you would use rock, and a lot of it are these connotations, right? Um, what our cultural ideas or our social ideas of this word are, our personal experiences of the word, right? When I think of stones, I think of more like smoother rocks, right, that are found like in a stream, or one of the participants in this workshop thought of the stone masons, like the stones that are used to make big buildings, that material, right? Rocks we think of as these big boulder or solid mass, right? And we have words like rock and roll, right? That alliteration of rock and roll, right, brings it together and makes it this hardcore thing, right? So we really can harness sound and meaning when we use this at the word level, right? So when you pay attention to which words you choose to represent what you mean, you can really, really highlight this feeling that the reader feels. So the main things that we're thinking about today are alliteration, which is the occurrence of the same letter or sound at the beginning or of adjacent or closely connected words. So that would be slippery stones or rock and roll. And consonants is just the reoccurrence of similar sounds that are especially consonants. So that would be rock and roll or slippery stones. Those are consonants that are making the same sound. Assonance is a repetition of vowel sounds to create internal rhyming. It makes words ricochet off each other, and they do more work in that way. Another way that we'll see in the poem we're going to read in just a second is how repetition also screams out to the reader that this is important, right? This line is important. Also, rhyme will make two words stand out, link together like they're holding hands. They're very important to play against each other, especially if it's a rhyme that occurs in like the middle of the line. Those are even more powerful. So today, what we're going to be talking about as an example is The Lake Isle of Innisfree by William Butler Yeats. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with this famous poem. I know that, and excuse me, when you hear the pauses, I'm taking a drink of water. If we were in class together, you would know. I drink a lot of water. Many of you have probably heard of this poem before. It's one of Yeats's most famous poems. Yeats was an Irish poet, one of their most beloved poets in a country that loves its poets. Yeats lived away from Ireland in England for quite some time, and he wrote this poem while he was away from his home. And he's remembering nostalgically a place that he loved to go when he was younger, called the Lake Isle of Innisfree. So let's listen. I'm going to read it aloud to you. I'd love for you to look at it on the page and listen to how he's using language to harness the meaning that he wants you to feel. One other term that I haven't talked about is onomatopoeia, and that's when the words actually sound like what they are. You'll see that when you think about the lake water lapping. The Lake Isle of Innisfree. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin built there of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honey bee, and live alone in the bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of the morning to where the cricket sings. There midnight's all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and evening full of linnets' wings. I will arise and go now, for always night and day I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore, while I stand on the roadway or on the pavement's gray. I hear it in the deep heart's core. So as you can see by looking at this poem closely, all of the sound work that Yeats is doing in this poem creates this mood of pure peace, and rejuvenation. Who doesn't want to go to Innisfree after listening to this poem, right? The vowel sounds in I will arise, right? Those words slur together, right? And go now, the repetition of go to Innisfree. The small cabin of clay, right? Wattles are like adobe, Irish adobe. That's one way to think of it. The hive for the honeybee, right? And the bee loud glade. That's onomatopoeic, right? You hear that bee, right? Bzz. And the single syllables of bee loud glade, right? They slow down the line so that we pay attention to that. We're in that bee loud glade. The sound work continues with alliteration, consonants, assonants throughout this poem. Linnets are like birds that come out at twilight, that eat the bugs. Not sparrows, but we have them here, and I can't think of the name. And I thought of it. The meetup thought of it yesterday, so I apologize. I'll think of it in a second. But there, you can see them, and the noon, a purple glow in Ireland. Midday, the sky looks purple. I will arise and go now for always, night and day. And this is where we hear real onomatopoeic words. I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore, right? You can hear the sound of the lake. And the contrast where he's standing in a city, right? In far, far away, yet his longing comes out, right? Because he's standing on the roadway or on the pavement's gray. The way roadway and gray are rhyming with each other, pair those two distant places that are very, very hard for him to live in, right? And the core of this poem happens in the last three words, which are single syllable words, deep, heart's core. You can feel that. It's like a heartbeat. Deep, heart's core. So know that when you write a poem and you use sound, you can completely control the way the reader feels when they read your poem. I encourage you to read this poem aloud to yourself so you can hear exactly what I'm talking about in your mouth as you're saying it. So your first exercise is going to be, you're going to write about a place like Innisfree that's very special to you in some way. You can describe the place in specific detail, and you can match kind of the way that Yeats enters into this place with your own lines. It's okay to imitate, right? We've learned that last week. I want you to try and control the way the reader feels in this place through your use of sound, though. Tell us what this place means to you in the end without being explicit, right? So Yeats tells us he feels it in his deep heart's core. He doesn't say, I really love that place. It's lovely, right? We wouldn't feel it. You can also do this. So if you're feeling like, I can't write about a happy place, right? Maybe you're just a dark poet. I get it. Think about a place that has left you scarred, that will haunt you for the rest of your life, and use that as a place to write about. So give yourself time. I often tell people to start off with, you have your writing practice, right? But if we were in class, I would ask you to spend 10 minutes just writing and trying to open up an idea, okay? And please know you're always welcome to stop by my office hours if you want to talk about what you've written. We can talk about how you can, keep going or revise it into a more complex draft. So our second exercise this week, yes, you get to write 2 poems again. I'm so excited. You're going to be harnessing metaphor and story. So there's stories that we all carry with us that we know culturally, right? Or locally, or just personally, like a family story. For example, in my family, my grandmother came over in the Dust Bowl, and it's a family story that she when she was driving across their family, she had this one ring that was so important to her, and it was a garnet ring with seed pearls all around it. And it's the family story that they ran out of money, and so she was forced to sell her ring somewhere around, I think around Washington State, when they were coming back down to try to find work in California. And she always was upset about it. It was a story she carried with her, that the regret of losing this ring. So everyone has a family story like that. Something that, oh, my crazy Uncle Willis, right? And we have national stories. Like we have stories that tell the story of our country, right? However complicated it has become. We have stories that tell the history of our place, like where we live, right? And then we have like legends and stories that carry over through generations, right? Like, for example, what we're going to be talking about today for this poem is the story of Atlantis, right? This city that disappeared overnight and sunk beneath the ocean, right? Many writers, when they begin writing, use abstractions such as love, hate, fear, anger, as a way to communicate emotion in a poem. However, if I were to ask each of you for your definition of what fear is, you would have a totally different meaning, right? That's because words such as these rely on connotations, right? All those experiences and ideas that we associate with the word, they make the word real for us. So fear for you may be about, I was telling the class yesterday about watching The Shining, Stephen King's The Shining for the first time. Or maybe it was when you were really young, you were left alone in a supermarket, and you are always a little hesitant when you go someplace on your own because you have that fear embedded in you, right? Or I was talking about, I have a terrible fear of snakes. And it's from an experience I had as a young child walking home from school when there was this enormous gopher snake. But it wasn't poisonous, but I had no idea. It was like 6-7 feet long. And it scared the crap out of me, right? And so I have that fear embedded in me. And so when I use the word fear, when I think of the word fear, it has all those things and many more associated with it. So I think if you just thought in your head, if you write the word fear in the middle of a paper and you just start writing around it all the things that you are afraid of, right? Or that strike fear in you or make you have fear, right? There's a lot of things that are totally different, the whole spectrum. So I want you to think about as we move on to the poem that we're going to be writing from. So I didn't mean to do this, but we are having an Irish Poet Week. This poem is by Yvonne Bolan, who's an amazing Irish poet, living poet. She works half-time at Stanford and lives half-time in Dublin with her family. She's written Atlantis, a Lost Sonnet. I'm going to read it to you, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit more deeply. Atlantis, a Lost Sonnet. How on earth did it happen? I used to wonder. That a whole city, arches, pillars, colonnades, not to mention vehicles and animals, had all one fine day gone under. I mean, I said to myself, the world was small then. Surely a great city must have been missed. I miss our old city. White pepper, white pudding, you and I meeting under fan lights and low skies to go home in it. Maybe what really happened is this. The old fable makers searched hard for a word to convey that what is gone forever, and never found it. And so, in the best traditions of where we come from, they gave their sorrow a name and drowned it. Oh, I just love this poem. It's so powerful. So she starts off in this poem talking about the actual city of Atlantis, right? This lost city, and how ridiculous the thought is. Like, what if like we woke up tomorrow morning and on the news they were like, "Oh, San Francisco's gone, just underwater." Like, we'd be freaking out, right? I mean, come on. Um, and it's strange to her that like in ancient history, this isn't a big deal. Like, didn't anybody care that a whole city went underground? And so she thinks about it differently. She turns this idea upside down to think, well, maybe it's actually a metaphor, right? This poem's an extended metaphor, meaning it's one thing replacing another to make an emotional impression, right? So Atlantis could actually represent what it's like to lose what is most intimate to you, the person you care for the most, right? That losing that person is like having a city sink down underwater, right, to the bottom of the ocean and to never see it again. She talks about that intimacy, right? She calls it our old city, right? White pepper, it's very specific. White pudding, which is a food, an Irish food. You and I meeting under fan lights and low skies, right? You can see like fans and the strobing lights and a low sky of a city. And she's using that metaphor of Atlantis to represent deep, deep sorrow and loss of someone who is so dear to you that it is like losing a city when they're gone, like a whole civilization inside yourself. So, what I would like you to do is to think about a lost place like Atlantis or the city of Pompeii, right, in Italy, what was once the Roman Empire, right? Or a ghost town in the west, like Bodhi, which is right over the Sierras, right? It's this western city that it looks like people just walked out, right? The pictures on this slide are from Bodhi. Use that place as a way to talk about the magnitude of an abstract feeling, right? Without naming that feeling. I don't want you to use the word loss or loneliness or anything in this poem, okay? Just in the same way that Boleyn talks about loss in her poem. And don't be afraid to pay special attention still to sound, right? If you go back through Boleyn's poem, you see the same kind of special attention to sound that Yeats is also doing, only it's a little different because it's a more modern poem. Finally, I want to talk to you just briefly. I would like you to read the poems I have listed here with sound in mind. So The Letter by Amy Lowell is about the longing she feels for her lover, right? And how she can't write it down. Like, it's not, it doesn't actually represent, right, the loss she feels. And she's actually writing in response to Sappho when she writes this poem. Home Burial is another poem about loss and the different ways that a man and a wife and his wife deal with the loss of a child, right? They deal very differently, and this poem really uses sound as a way to show their different reactions to that terrible loss. Touch Me by Stanley Kunitz is my favorite wedding poem because it's about love that's lasted decades, right? It's long-term marriage love, and it's a gorgeous representation of it. And sound is so important in this poem, including the single syllable end to the poem. September 1st, 1939 by Auden is a poem that was remade famous. It was made famous yet again after 9/11. This circulated a great deal. But it's also pretty relevant to today, the strange state of our nation. Auden is classic for using sound in a way that controls the meaning of the line. I'd like you to pay attention. Finally, the last reading is the Selections from the Book of the Dead by Muriel Rukeyser. This is a selections from an entire book. It's a gorgeous book. It was very cutting edge when it came out. What she's doing is she's writing political poems, but she's writing from actual transcripts and newspaper articles. She's combining that content with her own writing as a way to out the miners who are getting very, very sick in West Virginia, and to really show how corporations are covering it up. It's a beautiful book. If you've never read it cover to cover, I highly recommend it. But there are ample poems included from it in this in the anthology. So look at how she uses sound to kind of meld those two different voices together really successfully.